I looked for the revocation of tenure for professors in a lot of these schools that you talk about or allude to. And really, it seems that when tenure is being stripped, it's for real wrongdoing. Plagiarism is uncovered, harassment of students, etc. I really struggle to find evidence in a country of 330 million people of tenure being stripped just because of using the wrong language. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't wacky memos that go out, or I'm with you that this stuff exists anecdotally. But if we think about what is happening big picture, I actually struggle to really find examples of this as an epidemic.
Recently, Peter Vlaming taught at a high school in West Point, Virginia, but he was recently fired. Why? Because he refused to use male pronouns to refer to a biologically female student. He didn't use female pronouns. Instead, he just used the student's name, avoiding pronouns entirely. For that, he lost his job.
I did everything I could to accommodate the student's new identity.
Yes.
I used the new name. I avoided feminine pronouns.
This is a case of compelled speech, really. Pete was actually fired for what he would not say.
I actually struggled to really find examples of this as an epidemic.
What is good, YouTube family? It's your boy Shy. We back again with the Black Anomaly Rising channel. So we gotta talk about David Pakman and Dr. Phil. Okay, so Dave Pakman, he's been around for a while, left-wing, independent, journalist, podcaster. He has a show on YouTube. Okay, so you get the gist. He had Dr. Phil on the show. So Dr. Phil's back. I just did a video about him the other day. Check that out if you have not seen it. But Dave Pakman, he interviewed Dr. Phil, and they were having a discussion about a lot of topics. Basically, he's accusing Dr. Phil of being a right-winger, okay? Because these days, anybody who doesn't agree with the far leftist progressive agenda is a right-wing, I don't know, Nazi or something, right? So, I mean, here's the thing that you guys don't know before I get into reacting to and my commentary on this video is these concepts, I would say, are like, sure, you could say somewhat conservative concepts, but really, I'm not like just this hardcore conservative guy. A lot of people like me aren't. I would argue Dr. Phil's not. But what happened is the left, it's like they was driving and they just went off a cliff at some point. They turned tyrannical, and I believe a lot of it started around the time Trump took office, and they started just going nuts and just going totally radical. And a lot of people hated Trump so much, they embraced it and became extremely cult-like with following the illegal immigration stuff, you know, taking away people's freedoms on social media, deleting accounts, and, you know, saying you couldn't post this and that and the third. And it became tyrannical. You couldn't go to work, right? Like, they're trying to take away people's ability to work. You couldn't evict people. It got crazy, and people, it just accepted it. It was a form of what I call medical tyranny. But without me going off too much, the point is that the left is what changed, not the people. A lot of the people are the same, and the left just changed. And Dr. Phil is going to talk about that further. So without further ado, let's get into it.
You know, I'm very interested to speak to you today because in preparation for our interview, I've been watching some of the Fox News appearances, looking at the book, etc. I never really saw you as a guy who delved into political issues per se. You seem more willing, interested, and I must say, maybe more conservative than I thought you were. Is that a fair assessment?
Not at all.
Okay.
Because I am so not political, you can't even believe it. And I'll tell you why. I know nothing about politics. And, and I know why you say that. It sounds like it.
Right.
I talk about these things as cultural issues from a psychological, psychosocial standpoint, how they affect families and people. And they do overlap with some of the things that politicians talk about, but they talk about it from a political standpoint, funding standpoint, how they can get this bill or that bill through, couldn't care less. But I am interested in those issues in terms of how they impact families in their day-to-day pursuit of life and peace and being able to raise their family in a healthy environment. So there's a lot of overlap, but I don't talk about it from a political standpoint because I frankly don't know enough about the politics of it all.
That's
I'm just
interesting.
willing to admit that.
So the key thing here is that Dr. Phil is acknowledging that a lot of this stuff shouldn't be political, but unfortunately it is, because the left has taken over so many things culturally. They have so much power and control. This is, again, one of the reasons I started this channel, because once I came to this realization and realized how bad it was and how it was turning tyrannical, turning into basically a bunch of power hungry lunatics who just wanted complete control over any and everything, be it music, movies, video games, anything that you could, hell, what you could learn about in schools. I mean, it turned freaking ridiculous, and I've had enough.
The internet became so prolific. And I mean, think about it. We're walking around in 08, 09 with as much computing power in our hands with smartphones, laptops, iPads, that we had when we did the moon shot. When we put a man on the moon, we didn't have as much computing power as we can hold in our hands as of 08, 09, and it changed everything. And people stopped being so involved with the reality of life and started getting involved in virtual life. And it's only gone more and more in that direction since that time. And also at that time, we started seeing the highest levels of anxiety, depression, and loneliness in young people since records were kept. And
I'm with you on this
changed.
one. I'm with you on this one. Jonathan Haidt has studied and written about this extensively. You and I are aligned on this one. What about the ones that fall under what you call the tyranny of the fringe? Because I don't think the smartphone example falls under that category, right?
No, that's why I say some of this is the unintended consequences of like technology. But then we've got some where we've got people that are just trying to change some of the core values in America, core values of family, trying to rewrite history. And we've got people that are coming in saying, well, we want to change history, we want to change what kids are being taught in history, we want to change biology, we want to change all of the things that we have for 100 years had empirical data to support.
But tell me more about, I don't want to gloss over this. I really want to understand this. Changing history. Okay, what was the history that used to be taught that now has been changed by the tyranny of the fringe?
So I want to just point this out before we continue. The fact, I get you want Dr. Phil to talk about it, okay? I understand that. But the fact that this guy is trying to pretend like he doesn't know is incredibly disingenuous. Now, David Pakman, he does this full time. Okay, I'm part-time and I know about what's been going on, about them trying to change stuff around in history books, remove certain people, like removing statues and getting mad, like for example at Ron DeSantis, like the whole thing about the slaves learning skills, and then after slavery moving on to do some of the same type of activities that they had learned while they were slaves. Obviously, if you're a slave your whole life, you're gonna learn a lot, and you could use that to your benefit later, not being a slave. And they acted like they wanted to remove that from the history or something. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, it's what happened. Like, why be mad about what happened? You can't go back and change it. It might suck to depend on what side of history you were on, but that doesn't mean that that's the history for you as an individual today. That's history of what happened before. You see what I'm saying? And that history, you can rewrite it. Maybe you could even erase it. But should we do that? I don't think so.
Well, pick an area. We can talk about biology, where we have always had two sexes.
But what about history? Just to pick history, not biology.
You see, he don't want to talk about biology because he already knows that's a losing battle. He's like, no, Dr. Phil, no, don't go that route. He's like, I'll lose for sure if you go that route. Let's not do that. So let's talk about something else.
Said history, biology. What about history?
Well, there's a lot of history to biology, and you would be missing a big point to pretend that there's not historical biology. But if you want to talk about history, we can not in biology, but just talk about the history of mankind.
Yeah.
We've got areas where they don't want to talk about slavery. We had one group of people that wanted to start describing slavery in history books as involuntary relocation.
Right.
This was not involuntary relocation.
I remember
this
that.
was slavery. And we've got people that are wanting to rename schools because people that were doing what were the mores and folkways of the times now would clearly be doing things against the law, certainly against mores and folkways, because they were slave owners at the time, are saying, well, now we have to tear down these statues, we have to rename these schools, and we don't want to teach about them. We have to learn from our mistakes as a society. We can't pretend those things didn't happen. They did happen. They were dark and ugly times in American history. We don't want to pretend those things weren't there.
And this is the thing that I feel like a lot of people don't get, because it becomes like this culture, again, cult-like culture of like, yeah, tear it down. Like, yeah, like let's remove certain elements of the history because it just sounds so bad. And what happens is a lot of these politicians, it's really politician driven. Like some people say activist driven. I would argue a lot of this is politician driven. Maybe you could say, okay, let's go back to the grassroots. So maybe there's some activists. They go hollering and screaming, sending letters to politicians. The politicians don't have much to go off of, so they go based off of what some of these activists are saying. Okay, and then all of a sudden it starts this big movement, and then they start tearing down statues and being against certain historical things being taught in school. The thing that's stupid about this is the fact of the matter is, again, you can't change history. Trying to rewrite it becomes like this fight, and they try to make it where, oh, you're some sort of racist if you want to leave things the way that they are. And I don't support a lot of different people in history in terms of some of the things that they did, but that doesn't mean that you should just delete, or remove statues or rename schools or all this nonsense that they tried to do.
And I think that is really narcissistic and arrogant and rewriting history instead of letting people learn from the mistakes that were made in America and that we need to learn from so we don't make those mistakes again. Because some of those people also did some really good things at the time. We don't need to endorse everything they did, but we need to acknowledge the good and the bad.
Absolutely.
When it comes to cancel culture, something you've also written and spoken about, what do you think is the prototypical or emblematic example of someone who was unfairly canceled over the last few years?
Well, I think the idea of cancel culture is more than one person, and I'm not going to speak specifically about one person. What I'm going to say is you've got people that want their speech instead of free speech. And so they will come in and talk about in a university certain things that can't be shared, can't be talked about. We've got universities that have put out language that they highly recommend their professors to not use. One of them that jumps out at me from the University of California is they were encouraged to no longer say America is the land of opportunity, or the job should go to the most qualified person. They were saying you can't say those things anymore because they are considered to be oppressive.
Come on, bro.
You have
really? You can't say that America's a land of opportunity, which it is. Like, look, 10 million illegals that we know about. Okay, maybe some predict double that amount that we don't know about. Why the hell would they be coming here if it wasn't a land of opportunity? Why wouldn't they go somewhere else? I'm just saying, it's pretty obvious to me that there is a lot of opportunity here, a lot of opportunity for a lot of free stuff. Okay, free shelter, free food, free healthcare, free attorney. I mean, you name it, free for all, as long as you're not a U.S. citizen, that is. Then you got to pay the government. This whole merit situation, like, I feel like people just don't believe in merit. Like, I've had so many conversations with people, and they will argue me down when I talk about merit as it relates to education and jobs. Argue me down, acting as though, well, nothing is fair. And I'm like, well, how is it not? Okay, like, all of the things that people complain about, I know that I'm only one person, but I don't have these issues. I didn't have issues with school related to, like, my race or my sex or gender or whatever. Didn't have any issues with jobs. Is it possible that these things were considerations and I didn't know about it? Sure. But did they stop me? No. Okay, so inevitably, the merit is what mattered at the end of the day.
To the faculty, even tenured faculty, that talk about those things or ask their students to take positions that are contrary to what they believe, what the students believe, they get grieved against, they get suspended, they get disciplined, and in a sense canceled.
The fact that we live in a day and age where you're considered right-wing just for expressing an opinion that, hey, maybe we shouldn't delete history, maybe we shouldn't tear those statues down and rename those schools. You know, maybe 10 million illegal immigrants is too many, right? Like, maybe there's only men and women, boys and girls, and not like all of these different myriad of genders in between. The fact that we live in this day and age is just purely astounding. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. And it really goes to show you what happens when you let these activists get to these politicians and let these politicians just spout these ridiculous ideas and let them have too much governmental control. When you got government having too much control, then they can enforce this ridiculousness across social media platforms, across the media, across music, gaming, and just regular television, movies, radio. I mean, they can do anything, basically. They can spread any idea across the nation, maybe even the world, if you enable them to have too much control. This is why I support small government. Don't support big government. You're never going to hear me vote for like more government programs, anything like that. No, any candidate that wants to be like, hey, we're going to have less big programs and stuff. We're going to spend less money. We about to drain the swamp. We about to fire a bunch of people that's related to all these ridiculous government institutions and stuff. I'm like, oh yeah. That's why Vivek Ramaswamy was my guy. So he said he was going to rip it out like Javier Milei, president of Argentina. Oh yeah, that's my dude right there. Okay, we need people like that to get rid of these weirdos in Washington, get rid of all these weirdos across the nation who are destroying this country with all these weirdo ideas. Drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new. I appreciate y'all watching the Black Anomaly Rising channel. I'm out.
I was so frustrated. I said, why won't somebody just tell the truth? Why does everything have to be spin, 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 spin? Why didn't somebody just say what's happening and let us do it? The media just won't say it straight.